Hello everyone, it's me LinkedInX2 back again with part 2 of our MSI review. Today we continue to evaluate the MSI meta, specifically talking about potential counter picks that we could and maybe should have seen, and also more reasons why we did not. So evaluating the meta. Does this even make sense? Like, how do we start? So, are the champions that we saw really the strongest? Which is kind of a silly question to look at a specific pick in pure isolation. As sure, pick X does some things better than pick Z, but is also worse in other situations. So rather than focusing on individual picks and argue for Lee Sin over Heimerdinger, for example, let's take a look at the champions that we did saw in the meta and champions that would counter them or the theme of the meta individually. So starting in the top lane, you see here our three common picks, Gnar, Jace and Lee Sin. A champion that would and actually could counter them all is Irelia. So Irelia, a bit more of the harder side to play, but we saw her once and she was completely dominating the other opposition. She has great matchups versus all three of them, and she's also a great skirmisher, so she really fits into the meta style as well and doesn't really need a whole team comp to be designed around her. Looking to the jungle, we have the power triangle of Udyr, Rumble, Morgana, who are all matching up against each other in different terms. And looking at the clear speed, overall there is not a real jungler that is better than any of them. But compositionally, picks like Kindred or Zac could counter or amplify their comps and seek out to specifically thematically counter each of their disadvantages. Looking in the mid lane, as we saw in the final between Damwon and RNG, the concept of range is quite something. Well, who knew, right? Obviously it has been relevant for years, and looking at the example picks here, Victor and Orianna specifically, Ziggs also always was considered great into Orianna. Even like 8 years ago in 2013 we saw a ton of Ziggs versus Orianna gameplay, and even like Xerath, even though he's not that great, and Vel'Koz with similar issues in terms of mobility, right? But even these champions individually work really well versus Orianna and Victor, who really like to get engaged upon, but if they get outranged, there is little they can do against these oppositions. Coming to the AD carry position, so as they are the main carry at the moment, I will talk a bit more about the bot lane here. So AD carries, they are main carries, right? We saw them popping off nearly every game, and they're really benefiting from the setup of their team, for example, to create space. Kai'Sa most notably with space, she's more free to play to her strengths by stepping up or straight up diving into the enemy team. So to speak, a Kai'Sa with a team that is already suffering due to previous counter picks is already in a difficult spot. Tristana, while operating similarly in her red mode, shares also the independent factor of a Xayah that can also like peel and set up a bit more for herself than the Kai'Sa. So in this case, these picks would suffer more because they can't really snowball enough to get over the mid-game power hole that these champions naturally have to do their item builds and the level issue. So if you attack them early on and in all three cases disrupt their snowball with a better bot lane matchup, right, using ranged supports maybe, we're going to get into that later, and for example more dominant laners like Draven, Caitlyn, or even Varus, who we saw quite a bit but was often banned. So this would follow the idea of aggression and attacking, being proactive. This certainly works in some cases and is the more comfortable approach for most players due to solo queue, but you could also try to take a more nuanced way in this in terms of color counters. So white-blue champions or white-black champions, right? White being the key to not get snowballed upon too hard. These champions then can hold out early and come online, and then they're looking to demolish the oppositions. Examples would be Kog'Maw, Aphelios, Senna, Jinx, Ashe, and as mentioned, Varus, for example. So not diving into the details of these champions in matchups and what they need, but these obviously can't be blinded without a good matchup in the support spot, as they require at least some setup to be super devastating. Already talking about the support setup quite a bit, this is quite an interesting role here. For most roles, the champions that were being played at MSI were the champions that are also super popular in solo queue. For various reasons, here in the support spot, we don't really see any of the ranged supports which have been dominating solo queue on that patch. So why really is that? I mentioned the need for reliable engage and brush checkers for vision. These are like reasons that are often brought forward to, and you can obviously make up more points from easy to play to bot lane synergies. But to counter these lazier support arguments from the tank players and combine it with my point of ADC counters, ranged supports, or more specifically enchanters like Lulu or Karma, very strong. If one paid attention in bot lane school, you might now raise your hand and ask, Hakase, isn't there a combat triangle in the support position as well, with engage, beating enchanters, beating poke, beating tanks and so on? And I would agree with this mostly, but the meta usually does give edges to a certain type of champions, so there's always someone who has benefits over the other position. And in this case here, enchanters with their mostly green elements, amplifying the AD carry strengths of these late game blue, black, white AD carries that we previously mentioned. These duos would then benefit greatly and play around the potential thematically counters that we usually see with engage supports, tank supports and enchanter supports. Also giving an example of a poke support that would totally wreck the field is Zyra. Super strong champion overall, and unless the enemy picks Ashe Misfortune, she would devastate most of the common tanks and also in team fights with her ultimate and her E a bit. The threat and the protection she provides, also great benefits. Having gone over different types and picks of counters to the meta game, the question we should now all have in our mind is why? Why don't these counter picks come out, and why, if they come out, do we see them only super rarely? So LS already has spoken a bit about this, so we're going to paraphrase him here a bit and maybe explain a bit what he means and obviously add on to that. So LS' answer to this was more or less, paraphrasing him, well, the players, they're bad, and stuff like enchanter poke supports take way more skill and APM, and very crucial in my opinion here is his take on these picks are a risk and they force accountability. What does he mean with this statement? Which I mostly would agree with, starting with the second half here, risk and accountability. I often talk comfort and ease of execution, and highlight it's important, especially in high stake games and stressful situations, considering also that many of today's players are in the 4th generation of pro players, meaning most of them are rookies or they only have a bit of experience on the huge stages. Makes it so that most are more risk averse and rely on what they know and are generally more comfortable. That of course is a roadblock for innovation and adaptation, but still nothing new, as comfort picks in especially game 5s are a story as old as League itself. That doesn't change the problem though, that this also happens in normal games, right? Example LS gave for accountability, especially for supports, is also neat. Paraphrasing him here again, you can int and send it like FedEx, but you can still CC someone and feel useful, right? And also players can make excuses like, I am the engage, I have to die, which is all bullshit of course. They know that, but these excuses still work. At least somewhat they do, and they make them feel better about themselves. So a main part about why we don't see these out of the box counters or strats is because of emotions. Rounding them up with an example we saw, Perk's Kindred. He tried something that you could argue was not the best idea, but he tried something that could, depending on execution, work. It failed horribly though, and everyone was after him with torches and pitchforks. He's a veteran though at this point and overall a special player. So your average first time MSI player that secretly already shitting their pants while sitting on stage will never risk getting crucified by the community and much rather risk losing with stuff they're comfortable on than risking it for a potential win. Also, a tiny but kinda important addition to the whole conversation is we don't know if the player in question decides that what they play. We know for certain that other players with higher status in the team can demand teams of their teammates. And then in some cases, coaches who have little clue about Pigman want their players to pick standard stuff so they don't look bad and they don't have to take accountability again. So if a support player only picks Nautilus, for example, it could be that his top laner, AD carry or whoever is telling or forcing them to pick that stuff. Obviously this can't be said to be the case in all, or maybe even not in most cases, but such and other toxic team dynamics are also something that should be in the back of our mind if we look at these reasons. These issues mentioned are sadly not only present at MSI, but can be seen everywhere all around the globe. And well, maybe someday it will become better, but in my belief, coaching has to improve drastically. And we did saw a lot of improvement in coaching over the last 10 years if we go into the entire history of League. But the road ahead is still quite long. Until we get coaching and overall staff to a power level, maybe like football teams or other sports teams, it will take a while. So ending this video here on a bit more of a negative end. I know that's not really the right way, but at least if we're able to recognize these mistakes and issues, this is the first step of becoming better. And this is already a step we have taken. And if you agree with my points, or maybe you have your own ideas on why certain picks won't be used, let me know in the comments down below. On your way down there, if you like the series or this video especially, maybe hit me up with a thumbs up and maybe consider subscribing to not miss out on future esport content right here on the channel with weekly uploads. And that's it for today though. Wish you all a great day. Till next time.